Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast where we explore all things reproductive health, rights, and justice. I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and I'll be helping you stay informed around issues like birth control, abortion, sex education, and LGBTQ issues, and much, much more. Giving you the tools you need to take action and fight back. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So, y'all, are you still riding high from Tuesday's elections? Woo-woo! We got some big wins for abortion rights. You know, abortion was on the ballot in 5 states, and in every state they were on the ballot, abortion rights won. What? That's pretty amazing, y'all. So that means California, Kentucky, Michigan, Montana, and Vermont all voted in favor of abortion rights. Y'all, we keep telling you, abortion is popular. Let's get on it. Let's get on this train. Abortion rights everywhere. Let's see. In my joyful mood, I got a new cookbook recently by the sweet feminist. Y'all might have seen her on social media. She shares fun bakes with a feminist message on them. Anything from like abortion rights or human rights to any number of other feminist messages. And she has a new cookbook out. And you know how most cookbooks are organized by like, pie, cake, whatever. She did a really fun thing, and it's called Baked by Feel. And all of her recipes are arranged by feelings. So there's like a chapter for when you're feeling sad or when you're feeling joyful or any number of feelings. So I decided to make a happy one, and I made her sour cream sugar cookies. And y'all, they made me so happy. I still have some, and I'm looking forward to eating one after I am done recording. Yeah. Sugar cookies are kind of my jam, and these were just perfect, and I highly recommend. And I cannot wait to try more recipes from her cookbook, Baked by Feel. Let's see here. What else is going on? Ooh, if you're listening to this episode when it comes out, tomorrow, November 16th, is Thanks Birth Control Day. Great way to go out and be loud and proud on social media and talk about why you are thankful for birth control. I will make sure to include the toolkit in our show notes so that you can access it. But it's really great opportunity to go out and say what a difference birth control has made in your life, right? Like, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't have been able to complete college or go to grad school or any number of things if it hadn't been for birth control. So thanks, birth control. And so on social media, that's hashtag THX birth control. So yeah, go out and shout out why you are thankful for birth control. And as I said, we will include the toolkit in our show notes. And that is tomorrow, November 16th, is Thanks Birth Control Day. Okay, I'm feeling like a little positive today. So let's do a happy episode. I know. I feel like it's always so many things are on fire, and y'all, so many things are still on fire, but like, let's just keep this entire episode positive. So I am so excited to do an episode talking about the Latin American Green Wave, and I am so grateful to have had Catalina Martínez Coral from the Center for Reproductive Rights come and join me to talk all about what the Green Wave is, what has happened, what is next, and what we can learn from the Green Wave movement. So with that, let's go to my conversation with Catalina. Hi, Catalina. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I am very excited.
I'm so excited because we're going to talk about good news, and that has been few and far between right now here.
I know. I am happy to bring some good news.
So I guess before we get started, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself and include your pronouns?
Yeah, of course. I am Catalina Martínez Coral. I am the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at the Center for Reproductive Rights. but I also was part of the movement that recently decriminalized abortion in Colombia, the Causa Justa movement. The center was one of the organizations that filed the lawsuit before the Constitutional Court, and I was one of the leaders of the movement too. So I am very happy to be here, and my pronouns are she and her.
Wonderful. Like I said, I'm so excited to talk about good news and to talk about the green wave. But I guess maybe before we get there, we should take a step back and talk about what did abortion access look like in Latin America before the green wave started?
Well, Latin America and the Caribbean was and still is one of the regions with more restrictions worldwide to access abortion services. Right now, we have 7 countries in the region that have total bans on abortion. Like for example, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Haiti, Suriname, no, and this is the reality today, even no, with the green wave growing up and making a lot of wins across the region. The reality is we need to advance a lot in the region. Before the green wave, in the countries that have decriminalized abortion recently, for example, Argentina, Mexico, and Colombia, women were having a lot of barriers to access abortion services. The model that existed before in these countries was a model of exceptions, no? Like when, for example, the life of the woman was in danger because of the pregnancy, or when the pregnancy was the result of a rape. So very limited exceptions to access abortion. And I think that because of those limitations, women were like facing a lot of barriers to access services, not only because, for example, medical professionals were like interpreting the exceptions in a very narrow way, or because there still is a lot of stigma between health professionals across the region, and of course in the society. So I think that was like taking understanding that model of exceptions was limited, and that women were continue facing barriers, and not only in the medical system but also in the society in general. The green wave, which is now the hope of the whole region, and I can say right now in the Americas, right? It was a goal that was really looking forward to not only advance in the liberalization of abortion laws, but also in creating a conversation, a public conversation that can support the fight, the social fight to really decriminalize abortion socially. Like that the society was hearing about this, was understanding the topic. And I think that that was how the green wave began at the first moment. Yeah.
I think one of the things that the broader public in the US is just starting to come to understand is the way some of those exceptions you talked about really, like, they're not well defined, right? Like, when is the mother's life in danger enough for the exception to go into effect? And there's just such a wide range of ways that that is interpreted that are so harmful.
Yeah, totally. It's very complicated, and I think that in Latin America we have been living that for many years, and we understand the impact, the real impact that a model of exceptions can have in the life of women and girls. Just to give you an example, in Colombia, when we were litigating the case before the court, one of the numbers that we were presenting before the court was that in 2021, more than 4,000 girls in the country gave birth, girls that were less than 14 years old. And in our country, where when you have like sexual interaction with someone being less than 14 years old is a rape legally. So these girls like really needed to be able to access reproductive services and abortion services in the country under the rape exception, but they didn't have the possibility to do it because of a very narrow interpretation. No? And that is one simple example, but I can give you many.
Yeah, I think that's why we're talking about like how all bans are terrible, because they get in the way of, I mean, honestly, just basic healthcare. And so that is why watching what the Green Wave has done has been so exciting. I remember, man, maybe 2018, there were some Argentinian activists who came and did a presentation in DC talking about their work. And so it's just been so wonderful to see it grow since then. Let's talk about it. So, what is the Green Wave and what has been happening?
Where the Green Wave is a very robust feminist movement in Latin America. It started in Argentina many years ago. I think that women in Argentina have been fighting for this under the Green Wave framing for many years now. And that is like the movement that achieved the decriminalization of abortion in Argentina in 2020, at the end of 2020. And it was a very important movement, not only because they brought abortion matters before the Congress, and it was a law approved by the Congress, the final tool, no, like that shift, but also I think that Green Wave movement in Argentina was very important because they really created a cultural and social environment to make this win, no, and this was something very inspiring and important. Women were taking the streets, were talking about this very loud way, were having this conversation in the public arena with journalists, with digital influencers, with actors, with opinion leaders in the country. No, so really, abortion was part of the conversation, even in the families. No, like it was something that began to really be very present in the country. And after the win in Argentina, and I think that while they were fighting in the Congress for this, the Green Wave started to grow across Latin America. So feminists across Latin America were already using the green bandana, which is right now our symbol, to show that we are part of a unified fight, right? And after that, Mexico and Colombia gave very important steps as well, no? Even if the fight in Mexico and Colombia were before the courts and not the Congress, as the Argentinian did, it was very important because the lawsuit that were presented both in Mexico and in Colombia, that at the end we won in both countries, were lawsuits that were part of a broader movement. So of course, some of the lawyers were litigating the case before the court, but this was part of a movement that was also working in Mexico and in Colombia in having the public conversation, doing pedagogy of why this was important, having public conversations, taking the streets, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, no? Because, for example, we in Colombia did the litigation. The beginning of the litigation was at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was difficult to take the streets, but we were there. We were like really present in the public arena, which was very important, I think, for the last outcome, because the decision of the court is essential. But what for me was more essential of the fight was the possibility to create this public conversation and to really fight a stigma and to really explain why this is a human rights matter, why this is a matter that needs to be part of the political agenda, why we need to really talk about this, and how in doing that we are building support in a society, and we are creating guarantees so that barriers can be eliminated in the future, right? And I just wanted to add one thing. In Colombia, for example, it was also important for us to be able to have a lot of multipliers in the public conversation, right? So, for example, the feminist movement was, of course, very present in the conversation, but we also had so many allies from other spheres, the human rights world, but in a more general way, people that are very democratic and progressive in the country, but that are not part of the feminist movement, but that were talking about this, or political leaders that never have been like talking about abortion issues, but they were talking about that during the litigation. So that was important. And I think that one of my last comments around this is that the fight in Colombia, I think that has been groundbreaking for two reasons. Why? One, because we were looking for the total elimination of abortion from the penal code. We really wanted to create policies in the health system so that abortion was only regulated in the health system, and that we can really forget about the penal code and the criminal system as a way to regulate a health service and a human right, right? So I think that that changed a little bit the conversation, and it is a very important one that we need to continue building. And even if we didn't have at the end the total elimination, that brought us to have a very important decision with a very important time to access abortion in the country. Right now, abortion is decriminalized in Colombia until week 24, which means that we are one of the countries across the world with a very, very progressive standard to access abortion services.
I have to say, as somebody who works in both domestic US repro and global, it has been just so energizing to watch the green wave grow and spread, and to see just all of the amazing work and the fights that have been happening in Latin America and the Caribbean at a time when things were pretty bleak here. It was just so nice to have these rays of hope that we could focus on and see that, like, it's going to come here. It is already coming here. You're already seeing a lot of green on the streets and at the protests. And it's just so wonderful to see that international movement making its way into the US space as well. But before we get to US implications, let's talk about what's next for Latin America and Caribbean. There are a lot of other countries that are still have really bad restrictions that you mentioned. So what's next for the green wave?
Well, I think that first, implementation of the decisions that we have already won, that
Yes.
I think is the most difficult stage of the fight, like to really be able to implement. And I think that in Argentina, in Mexico, and in Colombia, we have been working very good in the implementation of the decisions. For example, in Colombia, we have been working with the Ministry of Health, and since February this year that the decision was released until now, we already have two decrees that are regulating abortion services in the country under the frame of the decision that we won, which is a very good outcome in a couple of months, right? So we are happy around that. Implementation also mean that we need to continue working in the social decriminalization of abortion in these three countries and in the whole region. And this means that we need to continue combining advocacy, communications, mobilization strategies so that the topic of abortion continue to be part of the public agenda, which is important to do pedagogy and to really continue fighting stigma. And then in other countries where we can see some possibilities to advance. I think that Chile is very close to do that. Unfortunately, they didn't want the constitution this year. You know, like they were creating this new constitution, but the constitution needed to be voted by the people, and the people didn't accept the first draft of the constitution. But that constitution, that first draft of the constitution, included abortion as a fundamental human right. So I think that they are going to continue in that path. And I am hoping that maybe in Chile we will be seeing some progress very soon. And also now that Brazil has changed the government, you know, like no more Bolsonaro in Brazil. Now we are welcoming Lula with a lot of hope for reproductive rights in Brazil. I hope that this is going to create an environment in the country to create advancements in Brazil. Also, I think that I should mention what is happening also at the regional level in the building of human rights standards, right? Because what we have achieved, for example, at the Inter-American Court on Human Rights is important because it's binding for the whole states of the region. And the Inter-American system has decided recently a case that we litigated at the Center for Reproductive Rights. That is the case of Manuela versus El Salvador, and is a case where the court has recognized the impact that criminalizing abortion has on women's lives, and has also asked the countries in the region to regulate the professional secrecy of health professionals so that they don't accuse women that are writing to hospitals looking for reproductive health care, which is a very important standard, very important recommendation that needs to be implemented across the region. And that is something that states needs to fulfill. And finally, right now, there is a case before the court, the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, that is Beatriz versus El Salvador, which is going to be, I think, the first case where the court will have the opportunity to really develop standards around the abortion right. So let's see how it goes. But yeah, that is what I am seeing right now in the region for the future.
Wow, there was like so much in there to think about. I think one of the things that had me thinking of is worrying about healthcare workers reporting. Like, that is a major concern, and it's something that I think people who maybe aren't in the repro movement are starting to grapple with a little more on what that's going to mean in the US context as well. And that's really worrying, because that's a space where you should be able to trust your provider to do what's best for you, and that's not always the case when abortion is criminalized.
I know. I know. And that is why it's so important also to consider abortion in a very broader way, because abortion is not only about fighting for the liberalization of abortion services, but also to really fight for everything that is around the service. No? So, for example, professional secrecy of health professionals, or for example the need to really understand the capacity and consent that girls and adolescents have to decide around their bodies, right? And I think that that is also something that we need to continue fighting for that capacity, that evolving capacity that girls and adolescents have to make decision over their bodies, also to eliminate third authorizations, no, that still exist. And I imagine that in the US, maybe this is something that is going to start being more present after the Dobbs decision. And finally, also to see the restrictions that women have to access abortion in one state, and how they will be looking for that in another state, and which kind of restrictions can be like built in that sense. So yeah, I think that we need to have our eyes open in many fields, what makes this fight very complicated.
Okay, so the other thing I remembered that I was thinking of is the implementation part, right? Like, you've got these great changes, but I think this is something we talk about in my global side when we talk about like the global gag rule, where it like comes and goes, but it's not just like flipping a light switch, like all of a sudden it's gone and all these services are starting to happen again. There's like infrastructure and capacity that needs to be built up, and so there is a lot of work to be done on that implementation side to make sure that everybody is able to access the care they need. And I'm really glad that you brought that point up.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, so I think watching this trend of abortion liberalization, not just in Latin America and the Caribbean, it's really been a global movement for a long time. And it's really disappointing. I mean, that's such a bland word to use for what's happening in the States right now, but it's really frustrating, enraging, all the things that there have only been 3 countries in the 21st century that are restricting abortion access, to see the US among them. What can US advocates learn from the Green Wave movement that might help here?
Well,
I
yes.
know, just a small question.
Yeah, no, and it is very difficult to respond, because I think that we can have many ideas from the South on how we can support on what we can teach, no, from our experience. But at the same time, it is also important to hear what activists in the US are needing right now, taking into consideration that I know they are being like in a not in an automatic fight, because the priority right now is to be able to defend, being here, litigating this case, advocating for this, no, like, and there are so many things happening in the US which makes very difficult to strategize right now. But I will say two things that I consider could be useful. The first one is that I think that the US needs to really begin incorporating human rights standards as part of their domestic law, which is not the reality today. In Latin America, the majority of our constitutions have incorporated the human rights framework in the constitution, which means that all the standards that we have in the UN, at the UN, or at the Inter-American System on Human Rights are part of our constitution and are being applied in the decisions that are creating standards around reproductive rights. So, for example, if you read the decision of the Supreme Court in Mexico, or if you read the decision of the Constitutional Court in Colombia, you will see how the judges are incorporating those international human rights standards in the decision, which make them easier to advance in the recognition of the rights. And in the US, this is not the same framework. Of course, the amendments are very old, and the constitutional framework in the US haven't incorporated the human rights framework into their domestic system. And I think that there is something to build there, like maybe advocating before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, so that the Inter-American Commission can begin having these conversations with the US, maybe advocating before the US government, so that the US government understand the need to ratify some of these international conventions and some of these regional conventions. I think that there is a lot of room to work around advocating for an incorporation of human rights standards in the US. That is one first recommendation. And the second one, I think that is continue strengthening the movement and the public conversation and the mobilization, because I think that what makes us stronger is the possibility to work in a unified movement that is really making a lot of noise around what is important, and what is fair, and what is a human rights issue, and why we need to continue making this fight, having this fight, giving this fight, right? So I think that those are like my initial thoughts, but of course there is a lot that we can do, and a lot where we can articulate work.
Yeah, I the human rights part is really interesting because like there are certain parts of the government that are like more conversant in it, right? So you see like the State Department, because they do the global side, is much more comfortable having that human rights based conversation around some of these things. And other parts like aren't as fluent in it because it's just not the realm that their work is in. It's funny, I was literally having that same conversation last week with some people from the Belgium and EU. So, yes, I definitely see that point. And it was great to see we had two representatives wrote a letter to the State Department citing a lot of the international human rights standards, and talking about needing to apply those to the states and how we are falling down on all of our human rights obligations for treaties that we've already signed on to by having all of these restrictive abortion bans or laws. So it was really great to kind of see some of that being brought into this domestic space in ways that we just haven't seen in the same way.
Yeah, no, totally, totally.
Okay, so we always wrap up the episode by focusing on what can our audience do. So how can they help with any of the green wave stuff, or what actions can they take?
Well, I think that sharing the stories of what is happening, following our accounts across the region, sharing in social media, so that more audience can see what is happening in the region is already a way to support us because that makes us stronger. And of course, March, like if we are organizing a strike or if we are doing a public event or a public manifestation or something, it would be great if they can support that, no? Both in the US and across the region. I think that having people in the streets wearing their green bandana and showing that we are a unified movement is wonderful and is what makes the movement stronger. So I think that is part of what we can do, and also talking about this with our friends, with our families, explaining. I know it's complicated sometimes, and even in our families and between our friends, we can like have difficult conversation around these issues. But I think that is in those spaces where we can really create an impact and where we can really create a very sensible conversation because it's a conversation that comes from love, friendship, from understanding, mutual understanding. Those are the more, I don't know how to say this word in English, gratificante, like is like very, very moving.
Yeah, that personal, like, talking to your family work, like, I think it's often underestimated as to what that can accomplish, but changing hearts and minds, even at that level, is really important because you maybe change someone's mind and they change like 4 other people's minds, and like you can grow a movement that way.
Yeah, no, totally. For example, I can say today with a lot of proud that I have a dad and a mom that are activists and that are reproductive rights supporters, and that wasn't the case many years ago. So I think that we can do that.
Well, Catalina, it was so wonderful to talk to you and extra wonderful to talk about good news.
Yes, yes, and I hope that this is gonna bring a lot of hope in the US. We can do it. We did it in Latin America. I am sure that you will do it in the US.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, y'all, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Catalina. I really enjoyed having a hopeful, happy episode beginning to end. Like, that feels nice. Yeah, that feels really nice after having so many episodes talking about all the issues. It was nice to talk about where abortion rights are spreading from beginning to end. So, thank you, Catalina. I had a great time talking to you and having an episode all on hope. With that, if you have a topic you'd like us to cover or you want to ask a question, you can always shoot me an email at Jennie, JENNIE, at reprosfightback.org, or you can reach out to us on social media at reprosfightback on Facebook and Twitter, or reprosfb on Instagram. Otherwise, I will see y'all in 2 weeks. For more information, including show notes from this episode and previous episodes, please visit us at our website at reprosfightback.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at reprosfightback and on Instagram at reprosfb. If you like our show, please help others find it by sharing it with your friends, and please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.